right, everyone, welcome. I'm here with my good friend, one of my new close friends, Robert Bent, called Little Robbie, Young Jedi. We got so many nicknames for each other, and he's one of those guys that just sort of popped up in my life. You know, when those people come around, you're not really sure what to make of him. That's like, is he crazy? Is he just like really interesting guy? The more I got to know him, I was like, fuck, this guy's so cool, so interesting, very inspiring, super smart. Working on a few projects together, so I'm like, we got to get together. I want to share you to the world, or a couple hundred people actually listen to this podcast. So welcome, Robbie.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for the introduction.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, and I had this sort of epiphany the other day. I was talking to my wife about how much I've changed in the last 10 years, and how I was super close to a lot of people from high school, a lot of friends. And I felt in the last 4 or 5 years I'd lost touch with them, where I wasn't as close to them anymore. They still lived in close proximity. We'd still see each other time to time. Like, the conversations were the same. We wouldn't hang out as much as we used to. And I was a little bit bummed out by it. But then I realized, and I think it was an ayahuasca ceremony, I realized that it's okay to lose touch with people and you can still love them. But what I was really doing was making space for all these amazing new people that I really want in my life. So setting intentions. I want to meet inspiring people, interesting people, people that I look up to, people that are doing amazing things in this world. And I realized like how blessed I am because I've attracted all these amazing people, and you're one of them. So I just wanted to share that with you, that I'm super inspired by everything you're doing. So thank you, and I guess I'll hand it over to you to just tell a bit about your story. I know you've been on a pretty interesting ride since going to business school. You went to like the second best business school in Canada after Schulich, right?
Yeah, that's what they call it.
Number two, yeah.
Number two. It's just number two that's referred to. That's funny. I didn't know Schulich was even top 5.
No, okay.
That's funny that just before we get into that, it just reminds me of a story. So I lived around the world the last 4 years. So I was in Germany, Mexico, and Thailand, San Francisco, Toronto, working remote for the Ethereum Foundation. It was just me and my girlfriend. So we travel, and you just have whatever you can fit in one bag of luggage. So a couple shirts, a pair of shoes, pants, and like nothing. And so everywhere you travel, you can't bring anything with you. So it really forces you into this minimalistic lifestyle. What's cool is every place you go to, you're just meeting new people. And after you do this for a while, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you realize that in 5 to 10 hangouts with somebody, you can actually become really good friends. Mm. And so this fear of like, I don't see my old friends anymore, we're drifting apart, it's pretty irrational because most people are like amazing. It just requires like getting to know them. And once you do this enough times, 10 times, fine, 50 times, 100 times, you just realize that there's like amazing people and you always have friends. It's actually pretty easy to make them. It's just like this fear.
Well, I think you have a gift and a superpower for making friends and getting people to like you.
Possibly. Sure, we can talk more about that. But it's more just the idea that like, we were just talking about this earlier, this fear of like, people aren't going to like me, or I'm not going to have friends, I have to fit in with this crew. Like there's other people in the world, there's 6 billion people. There's like an enormous amount of people to meet. And so having traveled so much, I realized like if you don't vibe with one person, you just find the next one, and there's just so much goodness out there. So it's really cool, and it just plays to, as you say, like, hey, I want more people to bring in my life on like this vibe, like they're there, no matter where you go. So that just kind of jumped out.
And how important do you think it is, like setting that intention, or like thinking about the type of people you want to be surrounded with, rather than just allowing that space? Because I know there are points in my life where I surrounded myself with people that I guess were on the same vibe as me, but I guess weren't really helping my situation. But
I think it comes down to like, what activities are you doing? And so an example, we have, and I'll get into it, but we have also a hot cold little mini immersion center in like a garage studio in Toronto, and we built this WhatsApp chat that you're in with kind of 60 people, and we just set it's not really setting an intention, but it's just like we're talking about intermittent fasting, cold water exposure, meditation, plant medicines, like how to be a better person. It's just, if you're not interested, you're not going to tune in. And so like, we put it out in the group, hey, on Friday we're going to go to a blind drawing session, right? It's super weird. So in the dark, a guy playing a handpan, everyone just taking crayons and expressing themselves. And they explained to you before, like, doesn't matter what you're going to draw. It was super cool because people have ego around like, are my drawings going to be good enough? So they make it in the dark. So you're just trying to like connect with emotions, go to the song and let them out. And 10 people from the chat group showed up. Like,
wow.
What kind of community? Like, if you go to Soul Cycle, there's not 10 people from the class that like strangers that like go out after and hang. So I just find if you're doing these specific activities, they're going to self-select for people you want to be around.
So then, okay, so that's an interesting point. So you compare it to Soul Cycle. So Soul Cycle is definitely a community around there. because people are very into the same sort of thing. So what do you think differentiates the inward community versus like a soul cycle? Like, why are you able to then, connect? Is it because there's not really a face to the soul cycle that's pulling it together? Is there like a form of leadership that needs to create a group?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's like anything as it grows, it's really hard to maintain community. So I'm imagining the first like 5 soul cycles in New York when it was kind of secret. You'd go every day. The same people who owned it were working there. We're talking to the people. You develop actual friendships, kind of like elemental now. Like the breathwork, it's the same people coming in. They're sort of becoming friends.
If you don't know, guys, elemental is the best hot cold experience, probably North America, for sure. Toronto. So that's number 2, eh?
It's in Vaughan. It's in Vaughan for sure.
Vaughan, okay. But yeah, sorry, I just wanted to throw that little joke in there.
And so I think as something gets older, it becomes more, or scales larger. It loses some of the charm, and now fitness in general is harder to build community around. You might go with a friend, and you and your friend will talk while you warm up. You'll do the class together. You'll get coffee after, but like you're not going to be in there. And I think it's very rare to like turn beside you and be like, "Hey, where are you from?" Like if someone says that to me, I'm like, "Leave me alone, man. I'm trying to get in my groove." Whereas inward or elemental, the whole idea is like come to this place, use the hot and cold to put you in like a socially vulnerable state of mind where you're like, mood is boosted from the norepinephrine, you're ready to talk, and there's nothing else. There's no phones. You're like there to converse for the most part.
Yeah, and I think the terminology we've been using is like you go to somewhere like Soul Cycle to work out, you come to Elemental to work in.
Yeah, I like that.
You go inside and you really connect with what's important, your feelings, your emotions, you become more vulnerable, you share with other people. We found it, especially after things like the breathwork classes or now the immersions, when you're going through these experiences with a group of people, for some reason you're more open to sharing. You feel like you have this relationship because you're doing something that's a little bit challenging together, you're pushing yourself a little bit, but you're also the opportunity to share and express yourself. Whereas I feel like maybe that's the part that's missing from Soul Cycle. Like if there was like a sharing, I don't know how you would share like on a bike.
Or like maybe after. Because the other thing is people don't feel comfortable to meet strangers. So one, we know like loneliness is an epidemic. It's a result of like people being addicted to their phones, not having as many face-to-face conversations. People are generally lonely, which leads to like sadness and disease. However, they're not really willing to go out and talk to people because of like social anxiety for the most part. A lot of people are like set with their group of friends. It's very hard for them to go and express themselves to strangers. So I think these new innovative social experiences are the future. So like as you mentioned, breathwork, cold water immersion, they're things that don't traditionally people would use alcohol to do this to reduce social anxiety and go out and socialize. However, alcohol is bad for you. It can lead to problems with health, and then also saying things that you don't want to. Then when you kind of wake up the next day, you don't feel good. It wasn't like, wow, it was a success. It's like, wow, I don't want to drink again.
Getting yourself into weird or bad situations.
Yeah, exactly. So I think these new, things like breath work, yoga to some degree has been around forever, but cold water immersion, they're really good starting points
and
for
creating a social environment around that. So you're doing something that's healthy rather than destructive. It's funny. I brought a bunch of this conversation. I brought a bunch of my high school friends to have an immersion last night. Yeah. I've been trying to get them to go for like 2 years now.
Oh, that's so cool.
And so then when they all came, like afterwards, they're like, holy shit, like this was not what I was expecting. But it was an amazing experience. And maybe it's just like their own perceptions or judgments to war. Like they're so used to what they've been doing forever that they don't want to try anything else. So for them, it's like Friday night is, drinking, eating out, clubbing, or maybe not clubbing so much as we get older, but that's what they think of like their wind down. It's just about alcohol and food. Yeah. Whereas now just maybe more people need to be introduced to something that's different that wasn't on their radar and allow them to open up. Because I got them to do like a share, like like what are you grateful for, and what do you want to improve this year on yourself. So it wasn't going like super deep and like what's your deepest, darkest secret type thing. It was like let's just talk about something positive that you're working towards. And as it went around, like you can see them all like really listening to their other friends and like, oh wow, like yeah, that's good. They're like wanting to share what they're working on. So it was a very interesting experiment last night. So they all said we're going to start doing this every Monday night. We'll see how that rolls out.
I think the funny thing is like they'll have this amazing experience, and then when it comes back to the Monday night before, it's like a dread. Like before you get in the situation and you're open, your ego's like, oh, I'm not going to want to share. I don't want to go. This is stupid. And they do it again, and it like breaks open, and it's amazing. But there's like a huge resistance in between like time 1 and time 2, and like as you get into these things, like we did something similar. A friend hired the Inward crew to do guided breathwork at his house for his birthday. And, you know, people are like, oh, my wife's pregnant, this is so dumb, like, what do you mean, what kind of experience is this going to be, and, like, why can't we just do it? And, you know, it was no alcohol, it was, like, raw vegan food, and everyone's, like, up in arms calling me, like, this is so weird.
People from the party?
People from the party, like, friends getting invited, you know, and, like, because it says my name, like, we're doing breathwork.
They knew you?
They knew me, and they're like, what the hell is this? Like, why am I going to this on a Saturday night? And so usually I would like do an intake with everyone, and they come not because they're forced by a friend, but because they like want to. So it's like really easy to facilitate. And in this case, I was nervous. Like, man, what if these people aren't into it? It's very hard to like change someone's mind. And just like you said, sure enough, the share starts, and even just the share. It's like we share like, what was the best moment of your year and how did it feel in your body? When you're in a big group, if you have people share something in their body, it makes it easier for others to stay engaged. Because like 10 people are sharing, you start to like, your mind starts to wander. So we share that, and people are explaining like, you know, one guy won the lottery for a marijuana store, making him like an instant millionaire.
Oh, really?
And he was talking about like refreshing the page and like how he felt in his body, like, and then like seeing his name beside it and what that felt like. And you're like, wow, like life's amazing, you know, like this kind of stuff happens. And then you share something you're struggling with or you want to let go. And so what that does is like the first one raises the vibration of the room, everyone's starting to get pumped up how good life is. And then you have the exact opposite and you see everybody struggles. And this simple thing, sharing something bad and good, you might do with your partner. A lot of people don't do this with anyone. So you never have this like authentic connection. And then even with this group, we hadn't even started the like actual ceremony. It's just to share. People are crying, like, this is amazing. And you're like, holy shit. Like, so surprised that like these people who you think are so like tough, you know, really they are lonely also. And they want the social, everybody wants social connection. So like how do you, what you're trying to do, which I'm trying to do, how do you package social connection in a new way that's cool? Mm-hmm. Where you're like, yeah, I want to go to like the Soho House on Friday night, except instead of around alcohol, it's around like some of these other things, like breath work and sound meditation and, you know, hot and cold and like sweat lodges and all this kind of stuff. And I think
more of these stuff will start popping up as people start realizing.
Yeah, because we're going to build them.
Get ready for an inward/elemental near you. Maybe it'll be like elemental and they'll call the inward lounge. Like that.
All right, man.
We'll just find places next door to each other's. Anyways. Okay, so tell me a bit about your story. Tell me about how you got to, you know, building a 12,000 square foot sauna house or whatever people would understand it as.
Yeah, man, I'll give you the full spiel. But it kind of starts with a bit of history. And so I grew up in a household where my parents were very much, you know, Eastern European raised, very much like success is super important. This is how you measure your life, is like with money. This is how you measure happiness, is you have a good career. And so, you know, my parents made me skip a grade when I was younger, went to university early, went to this business program, wasn't even sure that, never really thought about what I want to do, just thought like, oh, my dad's successful, if you have money, like people like you, I want to make money. And, you know, and I came from a wealthy family, was super lucky and grateful, and, you know, I was able to have some money in high school and have like nice clothes and a car, and then thought, oh, this is why people like me, because of like these things. Mm-hmm. So I want to continue this. So worked really hard in university. I got a job, you know, in business school. I was like, oh, I want to be an investment banker. That's what the smartest kids are going to do. Like, I'm smart, I'm going to do this. Never really thinking about, like, what does this actually entail? Just like, well, that's where you make the most money. So went to school, did that for a couple years, and, like, absolutely hated it. You know, like, it's, you know, 100 hours of work each week. I would come in, like, do an all-nighter, like, not leave the office. I remember, like, someone threw a stapler at me once. Like, an actual boss, like, threw a stapler at me, like, in the office. Like,
why did you throw a stapler?
Like, I made, like, a mistake in, like, a presentation, you know? And it's just, it was such an intense environment. And everyone was mean to them. So it was just, like, this culture of, like, you're here, you're getting paid a lot of money for a 22-year-old, so I can treat you however I want, you know? And then also, like, the job itself is just not very exciting. Like, you're making these presentations to help companies raise money. You don't really care. So at the end of the day, everyone's in it for money, so it creates this pretty toxic culture. So kind of left that and was like, yeah, I don't really want to do this anymore. What's the next thing I can do? But still with this idea of like making a lot of money. And so I found startups. I'd always been really interested in tech. A lot of the stuff I covered at the investment bank was tech related. It's like, okay, I'm really smart. I know how to raise money now. I've been doing this. Like, let's get into tech. So I found a tech co-founder in Toronto, and I built this company. It was like a SIM card. It was a piece of hardware on a SIM card that you would put in between your SIM card and phone. And when you traveled, we know where you were going. We could send you a virtual SIM. So, like, you know, you're Canadian, you go to the U.S., we send you an AT&T SIM. You're an AT&T customer. You don't have to change your phone. When you come back, everything resets. And so we built, like, the operating system on the SIM card, the hardware itself, the billing platform, the interconnections with all the carriers, and at one point had raised $25 million.
Wow.
Had like 60 employees, had met with the president of Skype, was like riding really high. But all this time to deal with the stress, I still was like, oh, I want to have money. And so, spending all this money that I didn't have, or like cars and going out, and then to deal with stress, I would drink and do a lot of drugs on the weekends, and like kind of disappear, and was actually super unhappy. And so it was maybe 26, 27 at the time, and just super stressed.
Now?
So I'm 35.
35, okay.
Yeah, so this went on from when I was around 26 till I was about 30. Company ended up going bankrupt, which was like really, really hard for me. I had to fire 60 people who worked with me for a long time. Personally lost a lot of money, lost friend and family money. I was in like basically like the lowest of the lows, like very, very depressed. So I had this also problem. At the same time, I ended a relationship, which I was like really upset about. I was really, super in love with this girl, and it just didn't work out. And so I thought, hey, I'm like 30, I'm broke, like living in my parents' basement. My company failed. All my friends in business school are super successful. Like, I don't even know how to go forward. Like, I don't even know what to do. Like, this whole idea of like having money and stuff, it's just like it's clearly not the answer. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to make it. Like, it just seems like all these things are, like what do I even do? Yeah, like how do I get a new job? What can I do? And I just felt
a super smart kid, investment banker.
Yeah, I had no confidence. I felt like everything I did was like a failure, and like I just wasn't, like I had no path, and I sat in bed for a whole summer, and I didn't know what to do. And so I started listening to Tim Ferriss' podcast.
Good old Tim Ferriss.
And I had always kind of been in meditation. I did my high school thesis on meditation for like an English project, and we got everyone to meditate in the classroom. Sort of started me down this path, and so I'd always kind of read about meditation and a few friends that were into it. So I started with Headspace, just kind of getting back into it just every day after listening to some of Tim Ferriss podcasts, reading 4-Hour Work Week, and it sort of gave me like a base. Now at the same time I was doing the meditation, I was still like kind of drinking here and there, so I wasn't like super happy with that. But it gave me, it was a starting point of something to like latch onto. Mm-hmm. That like in the morning, if I had a strong morning routine, my day would go well. So the morning routine was like meditation, gratitude journal. I wrote out these core values based on this book by Ray Dalio, Principles. And I was like, okay, I want to have principles in my life. So I really did a whole reset around like how I wanted to live. And then over time, like all these amazing changes started happening. So first thing I was like, okay, I want to leave Toronto and be in like a better environment. So I moved to Israel. Randomly.
Why Israel?
So I'm not Jewish, don't speak any Hebrew. One of our investors in my company was like, hey, we should go and start a hardware company in Israel. Can you help me like invest in like due diligence on these companies? So I looked at like 100 companies. I moved to this small town on the border of like Gaza and Israel. Like there was like missiles firing sometimes, it would be like alarms. And it's just like, what am I doing here? Like I'm alone, I don't know anyone, I don't speak any Hebrew, like this is insane. I was super lonely. And I thought, I'm here, like maybe I can, like meditation, I can like the next step of my life is to face my fears and to like just go into like these hard experiences and like pick them all and like do them. So, I got, just before I went to Israel, I started on this path and I like got my skydiving license. I'm terrified of heights. So I would go every weekend up to Toronto Skydive Center and like just like when the door pops open and you hear the like and like you have to climb out onto the wing of these little planes. It's not like in the movies where you jump, like you climb out, you're holding on, you like let go. And I found like huge advances in just like putting myself into, I was also scared of like wind. I learned to kite surf. That was really cool.
Explain being scared of wind.
Just scared of like I guess the adrenaline and speed. So I ride a motorcycle as well. So was another thing. It's like like I just went really into that mode of like, okay, I'm gonna do things that bring me like right into the present moment, and kind of got obsessed with like being in this place where I guess there's no inner critic. And that was like, for most people, it's like that's what's hurting you, right? Is this voice that's like, you're not good enough. And this is my whole life.
So were you able to abolish all of your fears?
No, I have fears for sure, tons of fears, but like it was just it was a starting point of like what I call a core value, bravery. And it was just like, okay, look, when you face your fears, you can get over them. And so that was like a huge turning point.
That's what I always say about like nature rewards courage, and specifically with plant medicines. Like when you're afraid to plant medicine, the more you dive into that fear, the more you're rewarded. And
so
even with the ice and like all these sort of things.
Yeah, agreed. And so I still have fears of like, when I listen to you talking about plant medicine, I'm like, oh, I could never do that. And then even when you're telling me today, I was like, man, that amount is crazy. And then I started being like, why are you so scared of this? And then so it was a trigger of like, okay, like this is maybe another next step. Because I haven't. So as my life started really going a lot better, this part of me became less important. It was no longer about like facing your fear. It was like, okay, you've done that. I feel really good about myself. I like learned all this confidence from that. So I moved to Israel. In Israel, I was working on this hardware company, and I started like going deeper. So I did like my first Vipassana there. When I did...
So Vipassana is like a 10-day silent retreat meditation.
Yeah, it's amazing. I have like a, and it's you think, oh, you can't talk. It's more just about like, it's 10 hours per day. And it's like physically very demanding. And so the first one, like I think I was only sitting like, I spent a lot of time in the room. It was like really hard for me. But I was going to come home over Christmas. And instead I was like, you know what? I'm not going to spend the money on the flight. I still didn't have a lot of money at the point. And I was like, I'm going to just stay in Israel. I'm going to do this. And it ends on New Year's. And it's going to be like the start of my year, getting out of this like 10 days, And so I did that. When I was there, somebody had invited me to try LSD. Like a few weeks later. So I became friends.
How did they find the Rachel letter and just like?
No, so it's so funny, man. You have these emotions. It's crazy. Like you have these emotions come up that are so strong, but there's no attachment. There's no reason, and so what you realize after like 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, like just intense anger starts arising. These are like stored traumas. They call them sankharas. They're like stored emotions in your body, and because there's no input and you're not thinking, you're just focused on awareness. Like things start to come up. Vivid memories and like a stale old emotion. And so like, the roommate's taking a shower and he's making noise while I'm like meditating. Like, who cares? And I'm in my head like, this fucking guy, like he doesn't care about me. He's like a dickhead. Like, how dare he take a shower right now? They're like, and then at the end, we of course become like super good friends. You talk to him the whole time. I thought he was like...
You were sneak a word in here and there?
No, man. Like, I was really, really like disciplined about it. You're not even... They're so intense at the start of like how they tell you. Like not even make eye contact. Like everyone is there for their own thing, and you don't feel like hey, you're like, okay, you don't want to disturb someone else's like process. It's not even really a desire. Like the talking part's not challenging. It's more just like the sitting.
Are you going in April?
I am. Yeah. So
I think I might show up that day up, and if there's a spot, then
it's meant to be, man.
It's like Steph's like, are you gonna go? I'm like, well, this is what it is.
That's yeah. So me, Emily, and I, we were gonna go to a consciousness seminar in Arizona. Canceled last minute, so now I'm going.
It's like that for me. I think would be way more challenging than like unlimited amounts of ayahuasca. Like for me, the ayahuasca, I feel so comfortable, but like sitting with myself in silence, I don't know if I can do it.
I think that's like exactly why you need to do it.
That's exactly
right?
what I want to.
And so it's kind of like, imagine the first time you did ayahuasca and what it was like, and I feel that these things kind of have, the benefits start to slow a bit because it's expected, and so this is like a whole new way of training. So kind of went from that. So yeah, so it's amazing. It's like there's just so much there. I'm really.
Like, what's one of the biggest takeaways of that first trip? Was like these emotions.
Oh, so he was talking about these emotions that are coming up, and you realize like they're not actually related to anything, which makes you then think in life. You're like, oh, there's a traffic jam, so I'm annoyed, or like I missed this payment, so like I'm angry, or like my son did this, and like I'm stressed. These aren't real things. Like these emotions you have, they're just happening all the time. And so usually your brain finds a way to justify the emotion, but the emotion actually happens first. And you can't control the emotion. They just come up. They come and go. So just like your thoughts, like you actually have zero control. And so I can say that, and you can be like, okay, I understand how it's true, but when you're meditating for 10 days, you physically, like you actually experientially know this.
So do you think you don't have control because it's something that's suppressed, and when you let it go, then you no longer experience it anymore?
No, I think it's just something that's just how our brains work. There's thoughts, that's like how the mind works. And so what you can do is, instead of getting caught up in these thoughts and emotions, is you can just
your interpretation, or is this how they're explained?
This is how it's explained. Generally, in meditation in general will be explained this way. And so there's this sort of like, if you think of it, your mind has two parts. There's like a watching part, and then there's a thinking part. And this is like kind of dumbed down, but just for someone to follow if they've never looked at this, is like you have your attention, your awareness. Your awareness is kind of you, your authentic self, let's say. And then your attention just goes to all these things all the time. I have to do this. I'm not good enough at that. That's not really you. If you go beyond that voice, like, who is that? Who are you? You know, like, you're not like...
I had this interesting experience, again, during ayahuasca. It was like a lot of my most interesting experience. But it was like I was trying to like visualize my wife, but then destroy everything that I associate with being her. So like her job, her clothes, her shoes, her body, her face. So I would just get left with like, who is she when all that is gone? It was super challenging, but then I would get like this essence of Stephanie. You know what I mean? Like, it was almost like her character and her emotions, expressions, and like my mind was trying to bring her face back into it, but I was trying to like separate the two and just like focus on what is she without like any like of her.
That's so cool. And she is something. And
she is something, and then I just felt this love and connection for what that is.
Yeah.
Outside of what I think she is. It was super interesting. Does that make sense?
Totally. I mean, that's exactly what you're doing in this meditation. Is stripping away all this, like how your brain works. There's like this default mode network. It controls all the other subsegments of your brain. As a result, it's weaving these things into stories in your life. Like every sight, sound, all these sensations you're having, you're weaving them into stories. And these stories over time create like an ego. And an ego isn't what most people think, where it's like, oh, I'm boasting. An ego is just your personality, your sense of self, which is like, I'm Geo, I'm this age, I'm adventurous, I like plant medicine. Like, all those things are just arbitrary. They're not actually you. And so meditation is just about getting into a state of hyper awareness to realize when your mind is creating these stories, you can like let them go. And that's where peace comes from, right? It's just like letting go of those things. So I think that is most powerful. And then also realizing that in the present moment, you don't really have any control over your actions, despite thinking you do. And so like, you'll go for food, you know, and you're so in tune with the entire time you're there, you're breathing. You're just focusing on like this little piece, the airflow, hitting this like for 10 hours a day, like just. And what you realize, so let's say you go for food and you're so in tune, like you can hear like the person like eating like 2 things down, and you know, and it might irritate you. And then you realize like, okay, that just irritated me in this moment, like this sound. I have no control over that. I actually have no control over this irritation. And you realize, like, in the present, you're just kind of, everything you've lived in your life has brought you to that point. You don't really have any, you know, you're just the sum of all those experiences. But during meditation, these other, like, subconscious actions, let's call them, like, flow states, where the conscious mind is shut down, you can start to change your future. You can start to sort of reprogram states. And so what we like to teach at Inward, like, the main thing that differentiates the ice bath from, like, you know, Wim Hof method or any of these other ices is, like, intention. And so when you shut down the conscious mind and get into flow state, whether it's like art, music, exercise, meditation, psychedelics, cold water, anything that's going to like increase awareness, you can start to reprogram state. And what I mean by that is like, let's say you want to be more loving. Like, that's kind of the example I generally use because I'm a pretty intense guy. Thinking about work, like self-doubts and stuff. So when I get into these states, I just imagine like love for my girlfriend, for my family, and like really feel it. And now because I've been doing that so much, it's much easier for me to connect to it naturally. And so I actually believe or learn in this meditation that you can change your future results by like reprogramming state. But in the day you wake up, like your day is set.
Well, I think time is not as linear as we think, and I think like exactly, if you're changing things now, it's really going to set for the future. But I've even seen like some of the studies and in some of Joe Dispenza's books, like meditating on past events and changing current like outcomes. Some really wild stuff, like where they would have a group of advanced meditators focus on patients in a hospital that were suffering from like a staph infection, and it was double blind, so they didn't know like who the people were. They just had a set of like a list of names that they were like focusing on meditating on. So what they noticed was the control group, no change. The ones they were meditating on got better faster, were much healthier, like all these different markers of improvement. The only thing that didn't change was the mortality rate.
Wow. So
they had the same amount of mortality rate.
Yeah.
But then so they disclosed the results, but then what they disclosed afterwards was that, you know, like it was a really rare phenomenon for that many people to have like that infection in that hospital at that time.
Yeah.
What they were doing was they were meditating on people in the past. So this had already happened like 10 years ago. They didn't know what the outcomes were going to be, but the ones that they were focusing on, all their things were improved, which is kind of crazy. Which is almost like rewriting.
What do you mean they were meditating on ones in the past?
So they randomly got like half the subset was given to one person, so no one knew what the outcomes for those people were, and no one knew what the outcomes for the other. So they got them random selected, like 500 out of 1,000, and of the 500 that were focused on meditating, this was all in the past. but they had already gone to the hospital. But the
Right.
ones that were meditated on, those are
Okay.
all the ones that improved faster,
Even though it was in the future.
even though they were meditating on in the past.
Wow, that's super weird.
Super weird, yeah. Vipassana,
Yeah,
New Year's,
yeah.
you're resetting yourself, and
Yeah,
then
so
what
I
happens?
came back and was still like the job I ended up working on in Israel with this company was still like extremely risky. I still wasn't that passionate about it. I don't care that much about hardware. I just went out there because I thought it was a cool challenge. I needed to change. Still was like kind of drinking here and there, just like, oh, this is okay. I'm young. People are going out. Like, what's the big deal? But knowing like it wasn't that effective for me. And so while I was there, a friend of mine from school and I decided to do a plant medicine journey. And this is where things like really went off. So after the Vipassana I mentioned, somebody had offered to do LSD. And so I literally drove up to like another city at 5 a.m. in the dark by myself.
In Israel.
Yeah, to meet these guys on a campus at a university. And we walked into the woods, took LSD. Only one of them spoke English. And we're alone in the woods. Like, this is my first real like psychedelic experience since like, high school. And don't know what to expect, but I'm like, yeah, I'm down for this. And like watched the sunrise.
Wow.
And it was incredible. And so I spent kind of 10 hours out in the woods with these people, and just like my eyes closed, looking at the trees, going for a walk. It was like really started to feel like there's something here. I wrote this huge journal article about it, and like felt just like a sense of peace for the next while. And so that kind of led me down this rabbit hole of exploration, reading. I read a whole bunch of research papers on like the efficacy and what's happening in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And then came across plant medicine. Thought like, okay, I think this is what I want to do. So, still was having struggles with this confidence from work, and like hadn't really hit my stride of what I should be doing, or what even I'm good at. And so I went to Peru with a friend of mine from business school, and we did, a full like kayak type thing, like 40 minutes into the
Deep
Amazon,
into the
out
jungle.
of Quito, staying in these huts that were like netted, and like swimming in the Amazon, like stuff like out of a fairy tale that you never think you'd actually do. And it was again following this line of like, okay, if you're afraid,
Do it.
push into it. And then since then, so I ended up doing the 4 ceremonies. It was a real struggle for me. I have really strong thought because of ADHD patterns, so I'm just like very, very focused, but like my mind just runs. And so letting go and surrendering is like so challenging for me and scary. And I just had like 3 of the worst nights of my life, like really. And the thoughts there at this place were like, just do more, like, do more. The more you do, like the better you're going to be. And so we take more. And man, just like feeling of like being bullied coming up when I was a kid, stuff I never remembered, reasons why I would even drink in the first place. I remembered being grade 8 and like I was trying to be cool in front of like maybe some high school kids, and they had a cigarette, like, hey, why do you guys want to smoke this? And I was like, oh, if I do this, it's cool, like I'm a rebel. And so I did. And then I kind of thought like alcohol and drugs were cool for like, throughout high school and university. And I just realized like, I don't think these are cool. Like, why does this matter? And like legit, no joke, since that time, I have been fully sober. So it's super powerful for me. In that time period when I came back, my career took off. I got an amazing job with the Ethereum Foundation. I was advising a big crypto fund. Financially, like, I had a lot of success, and then just found my superpower of like connecting with people and kind of like doing sales and like just started feeling really good about what I could offer. And like learning and everything over the last 3.5 years. I met my partner. I'm asked to marry me the next month, so maybe this doesn't go out until after that. She knows, but I got a nice surprise proposal planned, which actually helped me, but we don't need to say it on camera yet, just in case.
You keep saying I want to say it, you keep telling more and more.
It's gonna. Well, no, you never know what it's gonna be. So
okay, but you missed I think a part of your
Yeah.
story, which was how you use like the hot and cold to sort of like
yeah. So I'll get to that.
Oh,
So
okay.
kind of came back, and I decided, instead of going back to Israel, my friend who I did the ayahuasca with was actually a major crypto investor and asked me to come on and start advising companies in his portfolio. And so I moved to San Francisco and Toronto and sort of back and forth and just started doing that. I met this girl, who's now going to be my fiance in 1 month, and we lived together and we're super happy. But she introduced me to the hot and cold, and she just said, hey, on like our second date was like, let's go to this bathhouse. I heard about it on Tim Ferriss. I was like, yeah, okay, let's do it. So we go to this bathhouse, like no education about the health benefits, not super like cleanly or like well designed, out of the city, but like have an amazing time. Our conversations are amazing, especially for a second date where you're like trying to maybe still be funny or whatever it is, and we're having a tea and it's just like flowing, and like, wow, this is like such a cool thing to do. And then because we don't drink, we still wanted to be social and do stuff, and so we would literally go every single week for 2.5, 3 years. She introduced me to Wim Hof, so I went and did a Wim Hof ceremony that coincidentally you actually put on. And so we just got really into this like biohacking, health, and wellness field.
You at the one in Toronto?
Yeah.
Great.
So, we kind of did this, and then me and her had lived in all these places I mentioned before. And so, we'd go to Germany and there'd be a conference, and all of a sudden a WhatsApp group would pop up with like 20 people to go to the bathhouse after the conference. And so we're like, what's happening here? And this is crazy. Like, why are people loving this so much? And it's just so clear that the hot and cold produces endorphins in the brain that just make conversation. You're much more present, you're much more aware, you're much more vulnerable. So it's like kind of the similar thing that alcohol does, but in like a healthy way. So it just was so clear to me that like a social experience, a new social experience with like authentic connection can be built around these elements. And then the other really cool thing that happened is, like, as I've said, I'm super passionate about meditation, super passionate about psychedelics, have been continuing use of both of those, once when it's needed. So maybe one big retreat every 2 years, a meditation retreat every 2 years kind of thing. And just have struggled to get people into this. And a lot of my friends are 35, they went to Ivy Business School, they're wealthy, they're like unhappy. A lot who have families, happiness in family, because I think when you have a child, you're like, service becomes more natural. But for the majority of people, they're addicted to their phones. If like email wasn't bad enough, now social media is there, so like your attention is captured all the time. And I just saw him like, hey man, like about the present moment. Like, what does that mean? It just means that you're here. You're focused on like, hey, we're having this awesome conversation, we're smiling, we're laughing, it's good. I'm not thinking about other stuff. People don't even know what that is. And so I'm trying to get people into meditation. Like, I swear, in 4 years, maybe one person I know has went and done a Vipassana. I've given the spiel like 1,000 times. Like, psychedelics, I tell my parents about these things. It's like, oh, it's drugs, it's illegal. I'm not like, look, Johns Hopkins, one of the best universities in the world, just funded $20 million in research. Like, some of the smartest people, or like the smartest people I know, the smartest engineers are all like pro. They've done a lot of the research.
I brought my mom on. I made a documentary about it. Like, I was like, I would want to share with everyone. Same thing. And it took time for people in my circle to start being. I guess there's a level of readiness when they're ready to accept it. And some people are
but still, so even now, and it's becoming, even versus 3 years ago, it's way more accepted, and what the trend is to increase. But for the most part, there's still like a stigma for both of these things. Like, meditation is not a stigma; it's just challenging. So, and most people are like, nothing's happening. I'm not going to do this. So when I was doing the hot and cold, I realized like, this is it. Like, I'm in this ice bath and I'm in the present moment. And for those who don't know, the ice bath triples the amount of norepinephrine in the brain. It's a neurotransmitter responsible for mood, attention, vigilance. The mind becomes completely quiet. So yeah, it's like great for health, like your hearing, but it's actually the best onboarding to meditation there is, because you are there, you are live, you're in the present. And then I was like, this is it. This is what is going to get people into this realm. It's legal. Some people are scared, sure, but everyone's like, yeah, I'll come to a sauna. And the sauna has the same impact.
I always tell people, like, the ice is optional. Just bring your shorts for the sauna, or like, just watch people do it. If you want to get in, most people will get it and try it. And most people say that it was not as challenging, anywhere near as scary or painful, whatever, as they thought it was going to be. Just 1 out of 10 that like have some very challenging, like, maybe pain.
Yeah, but even those people then like it even more. Yeah, like 99% of people after, like, I fucking feel amazing. And like I have. So here's a thing for you, like, about following your dream kind of thing, and I'll get into why I'm doing this, but I worked at like huge tech companies, $30 billion platform. I worked at like other companies, doing like, I worked at a large investment bank. Like, oh, nobody ever once messaged me and was like, man, what you're doing is like amazing. Like, not what, never was I like, this is, so great. And now I have like a list of testimonials in a document. I swear to God, 100. Like, people messaging me on New Year's, like, you made the biggest impact on my life this year. And like, it's insane. Like, it's amazing.
Like, you can't make enough money for that.
People get out of the ice bath, they're crying. They're like, I just left my traumas behind. Like, we're doing couples things now, or couples are doing eye gazing and connecting and like hugging each other after. We do these like sweat lodges in the dark where people like crawl out of it.
Being super
Man. So, but I just feel that this is the way to get people into the present moment, and like it just for me now, my entire everything I'm doing is like taking people down this funnel from like unhappy, unmindful, standard person to like meditative, psychedelic warrior, and like what are the steps to get here, and like what does this person have? It's like they have the ability to be in the present moment, and so like step one is like hot and cold immersion, right? So that's like the most accessible thing. It's also great. The other problem I noticed is a lot of people go into these plant medicine experiences one-offs. They go into this meditation retreat one-off, they come back, they're changed for 2 weeks, and then like the habits start to slip, they're around their friends. Exactly. And so where do you go if you've just done this? You want to be around like-minded people. You don't want to be around alcohol. You want to be around like the type of people that are going to raise your vibration. So we have, vibration, I don't mean it in like a spiritual term, but just type of people are going to be positive influences and get excited about what you're excited about. So you come back and you're like, hey, I really found out on my trip that I should, help others. Well, it's going to be good if you're around 9 other people who are like, well, let's go do a charity event, So that's kind of the background of like how this all started, of why I felt the hot and cold was interesting. Why did I like doing? What's like the greater vision? Now there's like the specifics of like, okay, well, what does the hot and cold experience look like? Because you have your experience, I have mine, and they're like slightly different. So
and you're building something that's totally like maybe the first of its class.
I think so, man. So I'm
not gonna about that. Yeah, maybe today we won't go too much into psychedelics, and we can go into that forever. But let's just talk a bit more about this new vision of this legal until the psychedelics are legal. What you're trying to create?
Yeah, so I think one is like a community space, and you hear community space bound. People bat that term around often. Everyone's trying to like create community, and for the most part, it hasn't worked. You've seen fitness classes which have had a hard time bringing strangers into them and like creating actual community. Like if you go to a fitness class, you're there for 1 hour, you're pressed for time, you're not likely to spend the evening there. And then there's like, kind of traditional bars, restaurants. I think people are looking for something new. If you're out at a bar, music's super loud, people are drinking. If you're at a restaurant, 6 people around a table, someone checks the phone every 5 minutes, they're not specifically present. I don't think that there's a branded space catering to this new shift, right? This new consciousness shift. And so our first thought was, hey, there's like huge demand for these bathhouses. These ones just outside Toronto are super busy. As I mentioned, the experience is amazing. There's like Nordique and Scandinave, which are kind of spas. They're super busy, 2-month wait list. They're all opening multiple locations. And so you kind of have the spa, which is great because it's hot and cold, but it's quiet. Or you have these like bathhouses with no education and like kind of second-tier design. So we saw like a gap in the market. And our first idea was to say like, let's take the Soho House design and aesthetic, so it's like a homey, nostalgic place you want to hang out, and wrap it around bathhouse elements. So what does that mean, bathhouse elements? It's 50-person sauna, large, we call it performance sauna. I'll get into what that is. A ritual sauna, which is smaller, darker, similar to what a sweat lodge would be like. Cold plunge, ice bath, superfood cafe, and then treatments. And then everything in the space is geared towards, one, like a new social experience that you do instead of a dinner or bar, but two, getting into the present moment. So you kind of come to this place and there's talk about like what the present moment is. Not in a way of, hey, you're in the present moment, but just like, notice you're not thinking. Notice you're relaxed. This is what it feels like to be present. Notice the quality of your conversations with others. And so that was the first goal, was kind of, Soho House version of a bathhouse. As we looked into it more deeper, we got really interested in programming, and I was super inspired by Soul Cycle. So they have legitimately an 8-week training program for the instructor, and they kind of took this concept from, where a spin class was just in the good life, in, just broad daylight, and they said, let's make this a womb. Let's have 40 people here in the dark. Let's give our instructors full-time jobs and train them how to elevate people's consciousness. And they have like legitimately 5 segments to their classes. So it's like, come in, party mode, then it's like hard and like really challenging piece where it's like you're pushing it, then there's like an emotional breakdown time to connect with your neighbor, that's like leave feeling like a rock star. So they thought through exactly what to say at each point and train people to like really get this rise out of people, to create this cult following. And we're like, holy shit, let's do this in the sauna. Let's actually like make programming. And so had met our partners, Harry and Amanda, who are like world-leading trained sauna masters. Most people in Canada and North America don't even know what that is, but in Europe, they have entertainment in the sauna, right?
And so Off Goose or something?
Off Goose, yeah, the Off Goose. And so you can look on YouTube at like AUF, competitions. And so it's sauna masters with like these giant towels, waving them around in amazing dances, bringing the heat from the top of the room down. And then they use ice balls filled with essential oils and different aromas. So a typical set would be 15 minutes, hot enough that like by the last 5 minutes you are, if you want to get out, but you're watching this person doing this beautiful dance, you're smelling these 3 different aromas that are doing something. We thought, wow, okay, this is the start of programming. And based on all our other stuff from the meditation and psychedelic realms, there's a ton of stuff that can be wrapped for the mainstream. Mm-hmm. So, you know, like you said, breathwork, sound meditation with acoustic Tibetan crystal bowls and like quartzophones and, you know, aura sparklers and all these different instruments in the sauna while you're in this mode. And so we decided that it's not only going to be, you know, a social bathhouse, we're actually going to have like programming / coaching. So you're going, when you're in the sauna master is actually explaining like why you're reducing your chance of Alzheimer's, why your heart rate's going up, you know, your blood pressure's decreasing, you're actually increasing your heat shock proteins, which extend lifespan. So explaining like, if you come 4 times a week, your chance of heart disease decreases by 50%. So you kind of have this captive audience, and I've never seen any coaching in any bathhouse happening. And then to do that, so that's like the goal, right? This is like kind of like Scandinav thermal bath style elements, Soho house style design, soul cycle level programming, all wrapped into the social experience. And even with food, we're likely partnering with Nut Bar, which is a local restaurant, developing high nutrient dense foods. So not like a full meal, but like soups, cacao lattes, matcha lattes.
Yeah, I love their
broths.
stuff. I'm thinking about partnering as well.
Yeah,
I can need an intro to them.
Nice. Yeah. So, but stuff that's going to extend your stay another 30-45 minutes. You can sit down. You know, having traditional Japanese tea ceremonies, improve the social aspect that you've just. You know, you've worked hard in the hot and cold. You've gotten relaxed. Now you enjoy that relaxation with some sharing, some community.
And if you never try like a true hot and cold experience, like I've had comments such as, "I can't believe I'm not on drugs right now." Like the way your body feels, the way your mind feels, it's just such an experience of like it's like deep relaxation, quiet mind, but focused. You know, like some of the people say, "I would go home and I'd watch TV," and I was like, "I've never watched TV like this in my life," and I don't recommend watching TV, but they're just so relaxed on the couch and. They were able to focus, like, because their mind was clear and they were just like so into whatever they were watching, but they felt so amazing. And they were like, it was the best experience ever. And I thought, like, you know, I had to do drugs to feel like that, but it's just like a really natural environment of like a hot and cold. And I guess you do release some natural sort of internal drugs because your body is like the most advanced chemistry lab in the universe. It can create almost anything. Like, you know, you put in like food and come out with like DMT on the other end in some states. It figures out how to break these things down and re-put them together. So. Yeah, I guess we're creating the right environments to create these physical transformations. The alchemist. Yeah.
There you go, man. There you go.
So we're running a bit short on time, and I think this is the first of many future podcasts. And maybe the next one we'll do it in Word or Vine. And
sure.
We'll do a hot and cold, so we'll show people what we're talking about. We can dive deeper into some of the other things. I'd love to talk to you more about some of your business strategy and some of your tools and techniques and how you're like this master networker and all these other amazing skills that you have. But we'll save that for the next episode, part 2 with Robbie Bent. Yeah. So, anything else you wanted to share before we sign off today, or that I didn't ask you about some of the things you shared about your story and moving forward?
No, I think just, man, you're an inspiration. You know, when I came back to Toronto, I was looking to connect with like-minded people in the community. Your name came up 5 or 6 times. If you remember at the start, he's like, I wonder who this guy is. I think I showed up for an ice bath and then said, hey man, can I clean this place for you? I'm like trying to put together a checklist on how to like clean a similar business. And you're like, what are you talking about? Like, yeah, you can clean the flow tank, sure man. You know, and I showed up with a phone taking pictures of all the cleaning products and make our task list of like how do we clean everything properly. And since then, man, I just like, you know, I've learned so much from you, and I think want to give you a shout out is like in Toronto, you are the OG. In this space, so it's cool to see you starting to get some validation and you know, as this thing grow.
I appreciate that. We're in this together, man.
Yeah,
changing the world, and so are you. You know, every act of kindness, of service makes a difference in the world. So you may not think that you're just just this person, but every time you do something, you first of all raise your own vibration, you in turn raise the vibration of the planet, but you must also inspire the people around you. And even if they're not acknowledging you, but they're paying attention, trust me, and they're feeling how you're changing. And eventually when they're ready, they'll open up, they'll ask for guidance, or they'll help you on your mission as well. So keep doing good acts, believe in yourself, take care of yourself, do the hot and cold. If you're in Toronto, you gotta check out Inward and Vine, which hopefully will be opening in the next 6 to 12 months or sooner. Elementals, there's more coming soon to you. And we're just going to keep going. Like, our vision is to sort of allow as many people to have access to these spaces and these modalities as possible, because there's no better feeling than helping someone transform, and at the same time learning, transforming ourselves. And I'll say the same thing about Robbie. At first I wasn't sure what to make of him. But since we've become great friends, I've learned a ton of amazing things from this guy, just about how to be an awesome human being, how to work hard, how to take notes like no one's watching. Like, I still don't know how you do it. And all of like this dedication to work, to being a leader in his team, and to also his community. So if you ever get a chance, if you're in Toronto, definitely look up Inward, goinward.ca. And is there a website for Vine yet?
No.
Not yet. So the new place will be up, I'm sure, by the time this gets posted, or
you gotta find it in consciousness, man.
You'll find it. All right, guys. So thanks for tuning in. Thank you for all the likes, subscribes, comments. Really appreciate being part of the community. And you know where to get a hold of me if you have any questions on social media. So love you guys. Peace. And thank you guys for tuning in.